All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome to the webinar. As you're joining us, you're going to see a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. You can use that as much as you want today, ask us questions. But for right now, why don't you just go ahead and drop a message and let us know where you're joining us from today. We're a global company. We have customers from all over the world, and it's really exciting to us to kind of see who we're reaching today. So go ahead and drop a line in the chat. And then also, if there's anything that's specific that you know that you are hoping to get out of today's webinar, go ahead and let us know that as well, so we can make sure that we cover everything for you. And then as we move through today, anytime you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We will have time for questions at the end, so we'll make sure that we definitely get around to answering all your burning questions. And so with that, we're going to get started. We are Astera. If you're new here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. We provide enterprise-grade, code-free data management solutions, and we've been in this space for about 15 years now, creating solutions that range from anything from data integration, data warehousing, API management, data extraction, and EDI, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And if any of this sounds interesting to you at any time, go ahead and drop a line in the chat, and we'll have someone reach out to you, and we can help you get more value out of your data and possibly even set up a personalized demo for your use case. And we will have a QR code at the end as well for you to set up a call if that sounds interesting to you. So my name is Brooke Bethel. I am in marketing here at Astera. And I am very excited to be with you all today. And I'm joined by Fatima Basatia, who is a software engineer here at Astera. She works closely with the EDI Connect tool, which is what we're going to be showing you all today. And she's going to show a demonstration of the tool a little later on. So stay tuned for that. And then also with me is Mike O'Quinn, who is the CTO here at Astera, who is going to be talking you through a little bit more about healthcare EDI automation. So with that, let's go ahead and look at our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about how EDI works in healthcare, HIPAA EDI standards, EDI process flow in healthcare, some common approaches for processing HIPAA EDI files, and the challenges associated with those approaches. Why Astera EDI Connect? Why specifically this tool? We're going to show you a use case-based demo, and then we'll get around to answering all your questions at the end. So with that, we're going to start by asking another question, and this is going to be a poll. I'm going to drop this in the chat. So we're curious about what are the biggest challenges your organization faces with EDI file processing? Is it high costs and fees, manual data entry errors, slow onboarding of new partners, scalability issues with current systems, compliance with EDI standards, lack of transaction visibility and monitoring, or if it's something else, go ahead and drop a note in the comments in the chat and let us know. So I'm going to send this out to you now and go ahead and answer, and we'll kind of see where everyone's at today. And with that, I am going to pass it off to Mike.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Michael Quinn, CTO here at Astera Software. And today I'll be talking a little bit about basically EDI processing in general and how Astera's EDI Connect kind of fits in the middle of it. So on your screen here is a little diagram, and as I'm sure everybody listening already knows, but since about 2012 or so, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, has required that insurance plans exchange certain information using the Accredited Standards Committee X12 version 5010 message formats. This in turn involves healthcare providers, employers, intermediary billers, claims clearinghouses, etc. And the back and forth nature of these X12 messages means that entities generally follow the steps that you're seeing on the screen here at some point. So the message needs to be generated from a system of record, for example, needs to be transmitted to the right recipient. It needs to be validated and parsed and loaded into the data into their system. And finally, some sort of acknowledgement and possibly a follow-up message, depending on which transaction set we're talking about, needs to go out in return. So ensuring that messages are well-formed and without errors is critical here. Non-compliance can lead to message rejections and possibly delays and possibly other risks. So here's a list of the actual standards. So this is the complete list of HIPAA standards in the X12 little format, right? The space. So depending on your business, you could be dealing with just 834s, aka benefit enrollment, maintenance, and submissions. You might be dealing with claims standards. Claims processing, including the 837 standard and the 835 payment and advice transaction set. In any case, there's probably a functional acknowledgement going on, and there's like a 997. And by the way, Astera supports all of these messages out of the box. Okay, so any solution to processing EDI files is going to have to deal with some common challenges. Number one, you're going to have to be able to validate incoming and outgoing messages. And this is validation to the X12 standard itself, as well as some custom validations to your custom business needs. Number two, it's going to have to ensure that the data is accurate and it complies with HIPAA X12 standards. It's going to have to be, offer transparency and maybe reporting of those prior transactions. It's going to have to be secure, and it has to be scalable, right? So can it handle onboarding of new partners? How many messages can it handle per second, per minute, per month? So these are questions that always have to be addressed in any kind of solution that you're implementing in order to be able to work with EDI files. So I think, I don't know if we have the results in yet. Brooke, do we have any results from our poll?
We do, yes. So it looks like the largest portion of our audience is split between high costs and fees and manual data entry errors. And then we do have another small portion that is compliance with EDI standards.
Yeah, I think that pretty much breaks down to our experience with our customers. So not a surprise there.
Great. And then from there, we're gonna go ahead and get a new poll rolling. So how does your organization currently handle EDI file processing? And so this can be anything from value-added networks or VANs, homegrown systems, third-party EDI service providers, cloud-based EDI solutions, or other. If it's other, go ahead and let us know in the chat. And I'm going to publish that right now. So go ahead and answer whenever you get the chance, and we'll circle back to that in a little bit.
Okay, so this is a good segue into this next slide here, where we're talking about common approaches for processing HIPAA EDI files. So option number one is you just outsource it to somebody else. So this is great for. Okay, so basically that's number one. Basically, you outsource it to somebody else. You kind of don't worry about the EDI message processing yourself. You just hire a service to handle it for you. Number two, you build it yourself. It's a homegrown solution. You code it yourself. And number three is you procure an off-the-shelf solution that does all or most of the EDI processing for you. So let's take a look at the first one, at the EDI third-party service providers and how they work and the challenges they might present. So in this diagram, they're acting kind of sort of as a middleman. So between the employers, insurance providers, employers marked with a box A, insurance provider marked with a box B, and the healthcare provider marked with a box C, you'll have this middleman, this TPS or third-party service provider. And they'll handle all of the communications, validations, compliance, etc. And also, you'll have to work with them on onboarding new partners. So this is great for smaller companies. So let's move on to the kind of the pros and cons of that. It's great for smaller companies that maybe don't have the means to be able to build their own systems to deal with EDI. And their customers that use their services can feel confident that the compliance standards are being met. So but it's not all sunshine and roses though. So because these services might cost a pretty penny, and the cost will quickly grow with increased transaction volumes and trading partners. And because it's outsourced, you're now kind of at the mercy of whatever development process this company might be following, which might be lead to slow onboarding times or little support when something goes wrong. So let's move on to the second option, which is processing HIPAA EDI files with homegrown solutions. So maybe you want a little bit more control and you decide to DIY it, right? So that's great. I applaud you for your initiative and bootstrappiness. You can get rid of the ongoing vendor cost and build it the way you need it to work, quirky requirements and all. But I've got some bad news. This is not a simple project and not one you're going to be able to give to a junior programmer. X12 is not for the faint of heart. This is going to require a real project with an experienced, i.e. expensive coder that may not even have EDI expertise. The setup costs can be massive and the ongoing maintenance is significant. So when you're done, hopefully, when you're done building the solution, hopefully it works. And that includes being able to minimize errors and scale when the amount of messages being processed increases, which is not a guarantee. So these are all huge risks that you'll take on when going it alone. So let's move on to the third option, which is to use a system that specializes in EDI processing, such as a tool such as ours, EDI Connect. So a deployed EDI Connect or deployed system, in this case we'll talk about specifically EDI Connect. It's a system that takes the place of the third-party service provider, which means that you have complete control of it. So you're leveraging pre-existing components, but you're deploying that system yourself and it's completely controlled by you. So let's take a little bit about how it works at a high level. So in this diagram, you'll see that on the left here, we're dealing with trading partners and how we're ingesting data from those. So you'll have to define the connections for those trading partners, whether that be AS2, FTP, email, what have you, right? So they're going to provide their data to you in a multitude of ways, and EDI Connect will either go get it or receive it, right? And at this point, the execution, basically the system will execute a particular flow, this box in the middle, and that flow is going to be responsible for reading the file, parsing it, validating it, and applying the appropriate transformations to get it into the right side of the box there for the destinations, whether those be databases, ERP systems, API, generic API calls, what have you, and finally send the acknowledgement or the response back. Going the other way, it's pretty much the same exact diagram. It's just that flipped to start with maybe a non-EDI source and applying the correct data flow to build the EDI message. So you might be getting a file drop, a web service call, a database trigger, what have you, and then calling the appropriate logic based on the partner, applying the transformations, validating the data, building the EDI transactions, and finally writing the end result EDI file before transmitting it via the appropriate protocols to that specific partner. Okay.
And let's look at the results of that last poll. So it looks like the majority of folks in attendance today are using those third-party EDI service providers. That's 55%, with some other results spread out across homegrown systems, cloud-based, and other. And I'll publish those right now. Great. Awesome. So if you are using those third-party service providers, you are in the right place today.
Okay, so let's look a little bit about kind of why EDI Connect maybe versus those other two options. So number one is going to be usability, right? So because you are taking this on yourself, it's kind of a mix of option two, right? Or a variation of option two of the build it yourself. So rather than, as we saw in the poll, most of the people here are using a third-party EDI service providers. Maybe you're here because you're looking to take more control of that process. So in order to take more control of that process, you have to have the resources to be able to develop that process, right? So usability is going to be paramount here. And we offer here at Astera a code-free platform that requires no prior or no intimate EDI knowledge of the format. We also have inbuilt trade partner management, so you can manage all of your trade partners at in the same place, and track which protocol they're using, all the credentials you need to be able to communicate with them, and also map which logic needs to apply to which partner. Built-in validation comes for free out of the box against the normal X12 standards, and also any sort of custom logic or custom validations that you need to have can also be written and basically developed into the tool pretty easily. And of course, anytime you're talking about ingesting or parsing an X12 message, you're going to have to put it somewhere, and that somewhere is inevitably going to have a different schema or structure, and which is going to involve data transformations, data enrichment, code lookups, you name it. And the Astera tools have had 10 years plus of experience in developing these tools that can be used by business analysts, not necessarily coders. Okay, and then of course anything that you develop is going to have to be automated, right? So the more that you can automate, the better. More, basically manual processing is going to equal errors, whether they be your errors or maybe your partner's errors. You're going to have to deal with them. So anything that you can automate is going to result in faster response times and more compliant messages. Okay, and finally we have the scalability and cost effectiveness, right? So any system that you use is going to have to scale for large transaction volumes, and of course more and more partners you onboard. How fast can you onboard a partner is going to be a very important question you're going to have to answer when you are developing these systems. So using EDI Connect, it answers both of those questions. It can handle high volume, large transactions in parallel, and also it's very quick to turn around a new partner and onboard that very quickly. And finally, we have an extensive support staff. We're kind of fanatical about support. If you ever have any experience with Astera, you'll know that we are very quick to respond to our customers' inquiries. Okay.
Great. And in a little bit, we're going to start the demo. And so before we go into that, just to make sure that we check all the boxes and show you what you came here to see, we're going to send out another poll because we want to know what feature of Astera EDI Connect you're most interested in learning about. What do you really want to see in this demo? And so we're going to send that out. And our options are setting up trade partner profiles, validating EDI files, handling complex EDI files, automating workflows, and integrating with multiple protocols. And as per usual, if there's anything not in that list that you do really want to make sure that you see today, go ahead and let us know in the chat. And while you're watching the demo, take notes of for what questions you might have at the end. Drop those so that we can make sure that we answer them and really get around to answering all of your questions and making sure that you learn everything that you set out to learn today. So I'm publishing that right now. All right.
Okay, so thank you, Brooke. So before we move on to the slide, I just kind of want to reiterate that what role EDI Connect plays in those three options, right? So we talked about the third-party service provider, which most of the people here on the call are working with. Then the option 2 is build it yourself, and option 3 is the pre-built system. So in Astera's case, the option 3 or the EDI Connect is kind of a variation of option 2, right? It's almost exactly the same, in which case you're building it yourself. However, in this case, 90% of the solution that you need comes pre-built, and without sacrificing the flexibility to handle your specific requirements. So think of it as a head start, and the rest can be developed by non-coders. And I think that's the most important part that I want to convey here. and it's done in a visual drag and drop manner. The closest thing that you have to write the code is something that if you've ever written, function in Excel, you should feel right at home at. Okay, so before we get to the demonstration, the live demonstration, we'll show you the tool. I just kind of want to set that up, prep it a little bit before I hand it over to Fatima. And in her demo, we're basically going to go over a use case, and she'll be, basically playing the part of the insurance provider, where she'll be receiving files from employers or the third-party services, and the insurance provider will receive the 834, aka the benefit enrollment file, containing the healthcare employee healthcare information and the files that include the information about newly enrolled employees, changes in coverage, etc. And then another example where maybe the provider's receiving an 837, basically the healthcare claims, and how to basically we deal with the processing of that. So we'll be covering kind of some of the challenges faced, including the inconsistent delays, basically how we're addressing these challenges, and we'll talk a little bit about how we address some of the risks and the security, as well as the understanding of the EDI messages, interoperability, and of course scalability. Okay, so with that, I will hand it over to Fatima, and she'll show the demonstration.
Hello everyone, this is Fatma, and I'm going to be presenting the demonstration for this. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and here's the tool.
There it goes. Yeah.
Right. So here it is. Right. So this is the tool that we're going to be working on. To start off, we're going to look at a data flow. The data flow has a canvas where we're going to be designing and a toolbox. So the toolbox helps us pick whatever object we're going to drag and drop from the toolbox to the canvas. This has sources from which we can read the data, destinations to which we can write the data, and transformations which we can use to manipulate and change data and change the format and whatever. So right now we'll move directly to the EDI objects over here. Right, so these are the EDI objects that we have. The source to read a new EDI file, the parser, which would sort of parse the inner transaction, and then we have a serializer and the destination, which would do the reverse to create an EDI file from parsed values, let's say. To start off, we're going to drag and drop an EDI source file from the toolbox, and we're going to configure it in a really easy way. So what does it take? It takes the EDI file that we want to parse. So I'm going to add a file here. And then we're going to select the dialect and the version. So the version is like extracted from the file that I just added over here. And as we can see here, there's so many versions that Astera offers. So if any of our partners are working in a different version, it's literally just a click away. And it all comes within the package. So you're not paying per version or per transaction and like that. So this is all that we have to do to configure this EDI object. And this is supposed to be parsing the envelopes, like the interchange header and trailer and the functional group header and trailer. So we can preview the output like this. So again, as we can see that we have the interchange header trailer and the functional group header trailer parsed over here. Now we have the parser here, which is going to parse the inner transactions. So again, very easy to use drag and drop tool. And how we transfer fields is basically just mapping between the two objects. So here we have passed on the transaction towards the parser, and we're going to go ahead, configure the parser with same settings. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Excuse me, just give me a minute. Right. So like this is a partner profile that we can create for some rules or like validation settings. We can sort of check what validation settings we have to do and what we don't. But yeah, this is the file that I'm going to be using for that parser. So yeah, back to here. We're going to configure the parser again. And we're going to give the version that we're parsing and the transaction ID, which is going to be 834 HIPAA. And again, we have all different HIPAA messages that we support at Astera, so you could technically parse any of them. And then again, we would preview output. So the benefit of having this preview output is that we can see our data being processed on the go, just like this, like right after every step. So another thing that we have here in the parser is that we're not, so like the first thing is that we're parsing the entire data. So as you can see here that we're taking in the text of the file, which consists of the transaction, and we're parsing it into this tree here, which is the structure of the EDI 834 HIPAA message, like consisting of all of these segments, the elements within these segments, and then these named loops. And then we can see the parsed data here in the preview. And we also see that there is an error in this file. And the error is basically that we have, right, okay. So we have a segment, which is INS, and we're told that this is a mandatory segment, which is missing from the file. So like a mandatory segment missing, and then we have the error code for that. So basically this object is not just, so this, right. So this object is not just parsing this message, but rather also validating this against the standard X12 HIPAA rules to ensure compliancy with the HIPAA validations. So you don't have to do them yourselves, right? So like this has knowledge of the parsing rules and the validation rules. And moving ahead, we can, because being a business, you would want to add your own validation rules to it. So from the transformations that we have, we can pick, let's say, a data quality rule transformation. And here we can apply external rules, which aren't technically the X12 HIPAA rules, but rather our own business rules, right? For example, I would want the date of, like, I would want to create a rule with the date of the received transaction. So simply, I'm going to map it to my data quality rules, and I'm going to define a rule for it. So, and it's super easy, like how I define a rule. I just straight away open the expression box, and this is where you'd come closest to how you code, right? And this isn't very different than literally like writing Excel formulas. So because I'm applying a rule on the date, let's say I want to do something that I want to check the date. So I'm going to go select the date, which is PGN. And I want this date to be not before, let's say, 30 days of today. So let's say I have a rule that whatever enrollment request that I'm getting shouldn't be more than 30 days old. Otherwise, let's say I'm not going to process it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the date. Right. Today, and then I'm gonna add yeah, so I have all of these different functions that I could choose from. So I'm gonna, let's say, yeah, I'm gonna subtract 30 days from today to so yeah, here's my rule, like an Excel formula. So I'm gonna add another rule here. Like this is a rule that I've added, and I can also add a message, for example, whenever I'm gonna get the error. So the message could be enrollment request too old. So now this rule is applied, and now I can try previewing output again. to see, okay, see, so we have an error here at this field, and this is because this is like some four years ago. So and we have the error message attached that, we're not processing enrollment requests this old. So yeah, again, this is how easy it is to sort of drag and drop and map between the objects and actually parse an EDI file, which I'm no expert on. Like, I don't know what rules are and what is the parsing technique, but I have the entire message parsed and I have it validated and I have my own business validation rules as well. So now we're going to move to a more ready flow for processing a net34 file. So here we are on that. So this is
Uh-oh, I think we lost your audio. Fatima, are you still there? Fatima? So can you go back to the demo, Fatima? Can you go back to Enterprise? Are you, so maybe I can go and narrate if we need be. So what you're looking at here, this is basically the, like Fatima said, a more ready-made version of the flow she started before, including where she has encapsulated a lot of the logic in what we call subflows. So you'll see that she has two here, right? This is the validate and the write to target. So if you actually right-click and edit in the validate, you'll see that there's some kind of logic hidden behind that, right? So go ahead and open validate, right-click and select validate, select edit. And you'll see that there's, okay, this one's not actually doing anything, but the one after that is the, can you go back to that other one? The write to target, actually, this one is the one that's actually writing to the database. So we can go to this subflow, right-click on that, select edit, and you'll see that this one actually has the logic to be able to write data into the members database. And in the middle, she has another subflow, which is the transform the for the format. We won't get into that one. We'll leave that one as is, but just know that you can create these building blocks in the project. And this is kind of a powerful component of Centerprise, where you're able to create these reusable building blocks for later. So whenever you're creating a project, you want to be able to build things that can be reused and save you time in the future. And that's what these subflows are all about. On the right there, though, you have the members DB database destination, which has the schema that you're writing into. So there's a mapping going from the transform the DB into the database writer. So if you can bring that up to the screen a little bit, and you'll see that go to the options for how we're going to write it. Of course, you have your connection information that you need to supply. And then you have a bunch of options for how to write into this particular table. So you can write everything at once. You can chunk it into sizes of 10,000, depending on how, what kind of performance requirements you have. All of these check boxes there, check for field lengths, null values, etc. All of that is basically give you control to make it easy to load into your destination of choice, whether that be a database destination, a file destination, an API destination, whatever it is. There's probably a checkbox for it. There's probably an option that so you don't have to code that yourself. It's just a checkbox of configuration that you set, and you're able to get up in minutes to be able to write into those things. Okay, cancel out of here. Let's go on to the next part. Okay, yes. So in the what you just did there was to show the data source browser. And here is where she has the actual connection to that database. And here you can define your connections, including all of what you see here out of the box. So we have connectivity to a wide variety of popular data sources, including on-premise databases, as well as some cloud databases such as Snowflake, etc., and Vertica. So, and if it's not here, you can probably connect to it via ODBC, and that's not even to mention our web connector, what we call a CAPI file. Won't get into that, but it's basically the ability to connect to any sort of web service with a drag and drop capability as well. Okay. Let's move on to the next part. So here we're actually looking at the workflow component. So this is always going to be an important part of your EDI file processing recipe, right? So you have we started out with basically how to do a mapping between your system, whether it be an ERP system, and the actual transaction file. And that's going to be the data mapping. But here we're looking at the process orchestration, right? So aside from the mapping of the data, you're going to have to do things in steps. So in this case, what we're looking at is a workflow that's basically saying map in basically process in 834, followed by, create the acknowledgement, and then send the acknowledgement. So let's go ahead and just create one from scratch, just to kind of show how easy it is. So let's go ahead and create a new flow, and we're just going to drag and drop, or a new workflow, and we're just going to go ahead and drag and drop from the project on the right onto the canvas, right? So we're going to start off with our process, 834 in this case, just drag and drop directly from the project. So this is where those kind of reusable building blocks come into play here. So now I have this box, and then I'm going to drag and drop my next action I need to perform, which is going to be to create the acknowledgement, and I'm going to connect them by this green link. And this green link just means that, run this action only after I've done the first one. And then finally, I might have the acknowledgement that I need to send out. After that, it might be an email task. On the far left, you'll see all of the tasks that are available to you. And you have some send email, run SQL script, run another nested workflow, run an external program. All of those you can do to kind of complete what that business process looks like for your company. Right, so this is where the flexibility comes into play. You can have some pre-built flows already done for you and some functions already done for you, but if you need some custom flows, you can design those in a matter of minutes with this workflow interface. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. All right, so now that we've defined kind of what our project looks like, right? We've defined the metadata of how we need to process these files with both the data flows, which is basically the data mapping, and the workflows, which is the process orchestration. Now we need to be able to deploy this and have this, execute at, some live files. So for that, we're gonna create called a schedule. And this is on the server level, and here what you're seeing is the list of all schedules that we have in the system. So at the very top, you'll see one row that we've already created a schedule. And can you scroll up a little bit, Fatima? And on the bottom there, you see the actual details of that schedule. So it has a name, and then it's pointing to an actual one of our workflow files. Now, there's another way to deploy it, but we won't get into this for the sake of this demonstration. We'll leave it pointing directly to the file. And then if you scroll down a little bit, we're basically defining how we want to, basically for this particular partner, how are we communicating with that partner? And in this case, it's the AS2 listener. So if you click on that option, you have different options here. Can you click on it? You have basically temporal based. Well, you want to do some, you want to check something every once in a while. You want to check an FTP directory, an AS3 bucket, what have you. Maybe when a file is dropped, maybe when a web service call happens. And then this particular one is when basically somebody communicates to you via AS2. So AS2 is selected, and then we pick which partner we're talking about. So get out of this drop down for a little bit. And then in this case, we're talking about employer A, right? So this list now is where we're going to come into play basically the setup for how we manage our partners. So here we have this AS2 setup where we have employer A, healthcare provider C, and basically this is where we handle all of the details for that, how we communicate with that partner, whether that be the credentials, the protocol that we're using, so we're talking about security like AS2, you're going to trade certificates back and forth. All of that is managed in one spot here on the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next part, which is where we want to kind of put everything together now. And we're going to go ahead and show you kind of a live flow of what's happening here. So in this case, we're just using the workflow to kind of simulate maybe one of our partners sending us information, right? So pretend that there's a partner sending, in this case, employer A is sending us, or we're sending it to Astera Health Insurance, who kind of we're playing the persona of, right? So we're getting a message via AS2. Our server is going to listen for that message, and it's going to create a job. And what you're looking at on the screen here is the job monitor. So you can see a mix of red and blue rows here. The red ones being, jobs that ended in air. The blue ones being jobs that have completed successfully. So in this case, we got a message, an AS2 message from, partner A, or I think employer A or something like that. And then we have basically the results of that job run. So if you go ahead and double click on any one of these rows, you'll get the details of that particular job run. So here, this information shows you when the job, executed, who it came from, any sort of, how long it took. On the left side, you see basically all of the, details of how many records were processed, which parts of the flow it ran through. Any sort of bottlenecks, any sort of issues will be kind of immediately visible on this screen, and as well as a link on the right side. It gives you a kind of a convenient link to the actual acknowledgement file that it produced. So you can go ahead and click on that, and this is the result of that actual flow that we ran. So if you remember, if you go back to the workflow, you'll see that as part of that flow, we had to we had to generate that acknowledgement and send it, right? So so this is the flow that was executed when that AS2 message came to us. And then you go back to the result file, and this is the result file that is kind of a byproduct of this whole process. So all of this was completely automated. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't even have to open this tool. This is all running on a server, completely automated behind the scenes. And then you have the job monitor, which we were looking at before, which shows you the results of those runs. So again, here's the job monitor. If you ever need to go back and see, last week's, last month's, and it show me the jobs that ended in air, for example, or a search based on, some name or some subfolder that you have, you can always filter out this list. And this is how you're going to basically track all of the transaction processing that happened in the system. Okay, so let's now go to the next one, where we kind of have a slightly more complicated one, which is where we're processing claims, right? So we're going to have the data flow, which is going to basically map, parse, and validate that claims data. We're going to then create an acknowledgement, and then we're going to send that acknowledgement, and then we have a decision to make, right? Was the acceptance sent? If yes, we're going to go ahead and follow up by creating an 835 and then send that 835. So in this example, it's slightly more complicated because we're both processing the incoming 837, and then we're also building the 835. So let's go ahead and take a look at that 835, where that data flow for 835. Can you go ahead and open the 835? Do we not have the 835? Maybe we don't. Yeah, we do. Okay, so this is the very similar to the basically the example where we're parsing data. It's just in this, it's in the reverse. We have the same tree that we had before. This is again coming from the X12 standard, and we're just dragging and dropping and mapping to the EDI destination file. So this produces the actual EDI files, and then this becomes part of your project, right? That you can mix and match. So if you have different partners that have different mappings, you can reuse the bits and pieces that you need in order to create your overall EDI processing platform, or solution, I should say. Okay. And is there any other part of it, or is that back to me? Okay, so I think that is back to me. Brooke, can you share the...
Yes, I'll get that going. Sharing the slides now. Thanks, Fatima, for the demonstration. Sorry about the technical difficulties. That's just one of the fun parts of doing a live event. So let's go ahead and get back to our presentation and start talking about some of the use cases.
Sure, thank you, Brooke. So, you know, as Brooke mentioned in the beginning of the demo, we've been at this a while, and we have some pretty good success with some of our customers. Let's go over a couple of the use cases that we brought to this webinar. Let's say, for example, Chorus Health. I believe they're in Wisconsin. They had a challenge where they were trying to basically ingest these encounters, and they had a lot of errors with them, and they had to correct these errors. And it was taking basically 3 hours at some point to correct the errors and get it back out. So they were at risk of not meeting the requirements by the state, and they had a goal of trying to get, I believe it was like 95% approval rate. But after they adopted Astera, they went well above the 95% approval rate. They hit a 98% approval rate. And when they did their calculations, they found that they were able to increase their revenue by over $100,000 a year annual, just by using this approach to processing their EDI files. Okay, another use case is US RX Care, where they were had a challenge of a lot of different custom workflows based on their partners, and they were having issues with accuracy and consistency, and I believe a slow turnaround time. So they decided to take it in-house and use a tool in Astera, the EDI Connect. And I think the most important part of the story is that they were able to do it themselves. Their non-technical staff was able to manage the process and basically reduce the need for that third-party vendor, saving them a lot of time and money. Okay, so I think that is basically it from me. Brooke, I'll hand it over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. So just once again, want to say thank you for being here, everybody. We'll do have a few minutes left to answer your questions. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and drop those in the chat. This QR code will take you to a link to set up a call with us, to get in contact so that we can talk specifically about your use case, the challenges that you're facing at your organization, and work together to come up with a solution. I'm also going to drop a link in the chat in case you're unable to scan the code, and that will take you to the exact same page. So first off, I see we have a comment from Jeff in the comments, who is asking what type of connectors Astera EDI Connect offers to facilitate data integration across various systems.
Yeah, so I guess I'll take that since Fatima obviously cannot. So I think we showed in one slide where we had a connectivity to basically any database system, right? So all of the Oracle, MySQL, DB2, Postgres, and then Redshift, Snowflake. I think there was a list there, and we have that list on our website, I believe, that we can maybe link to in this webinar. Aside from that, we have connectivity to basically any web service. So any system that has a RESTful service API endpoint, you can easily connect to that. So as long as that REST endpoint has a Swagger file, you can download that Swagger file, and then just like database tables, you can drag and drop the web service, integration points just as easily as a database table.
Great. And then on that note, someone asks, does Astera EDI Connect integrate with HL7 standards for healthcare?
We do, yeah. So this webinar focused strictly on X12, basically the HIPAA EDI standards, but we also support HL7 EDI messages as well. So it works exactly the same way.
Great. And I think that's all we have. So once again, feel free to use these links to get in contact with us. If you think of anything after the webinar that you missed your chance to ask, you haven't missed your chance. You can still reach out. We'd still love to talk. And then I see, Ernesto, you asked about data integration solutions as well. So feel free to get in contact with us. We'd love to talk to you about our data integration products. We're really grateful that you all carved out an hour of your day to talk about EDI. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to us.
Bye.